So this is going to be a bit of a send-off video, not for the PowerMac G4 Cube that sits before us here, but rather the phone that I'm using to record this video, my iPhone 13 Pro, because I decided somehow, someway I pre-ordered an iPhone 15 Pro Max. Didn't think it was going to happen, but it happened, but I'm not going to go much more into it because that is not the central point of this video. So the Cube is a machine that I didn't think I was going to want as much as I did. But after VCF West 2023 and I got to mess with two cubes, I was like, man, these machines are really cool. I kind of want one now. And I began kind of scheming and putting out a call for some cubes to see if anybody had one they were willing to trade. And eventually I did find somebody, an awesome person who I will not name, but they know who they are if they're watching this video, reached out to me and said, hey, yeah, I think you've got some stuff I might want for the cube that I have. And not only did we make a good trade, I gave him my SE30, which was a machine that I really wanted to like. The thing was that the SE30 had the unfortunate problem of being released before my time, so to speak. So when it came down to it, I didn't know what I wanted to do with the machine once it was fully repaired. With big shouts to Joe's Computer Museum for helping out on that, by the way. Go throw your money at him or your attention, either or. He's a good guy. But once that machine was fully repaired and I got it up and running with a ROMinator and a just crazy amount of RAM, I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And I didn't know what software to really run on it because it was before my time. So to me, this deal was just all around a win for everybody involved. This person got my SE30. My SE30 went to a good home, so it actually would see some use. And I have a machine that 13-year-old me would have very much lusted after because this was when I was starting to get into computers, when machines like this were new. So I have a lot of nostalgia for this particular era, and I have just a list of software that I wished I could have ran from this era, but my machine back then was too weak to do so. So this is quote-unquote my era. So what about the Cube? Is it stock? What have you done with it? We're not going to take it apart on this video. That's going to actually be a part 2, but I'll give you a quick verbal rundown of what I've done with this machine. I've replaced the CPU with a 1.4 gigahertz Sonnet upgrade, which I didn't think was going to work as well as it did because it came out of a machine with a faster bus speed, but I guess the Sonnet cards intelligently adjust to the bus speed of the machine you put them in, which is pretty cool. I've also added a big fan pointing directly at the CPU heatsink. I know you could put a base fan in these, but unfortunately I don't have the proper fan on hand, but I had a couple of 80mm fans that would have fit perfectly in the space where the hard drive used to go. And it works so well, I could actually feel like a draft of air coming off the top of this, so it works really well for dissipating the heat off the CPU heatsink. Speaking of which, you might be asking, well, where's the hard drive going to go then? I've actually got a SATA SSD in this thing by way of an IDE to SATA bridge, and I've actually taken the SSD and shucked it, so to speak, because modern SSDs of a lower capacity variety, they don't generally use the entire SATA drive footprint, so if you open the case, you'll find that the actual PCB inside is of a much shorter length, usually about halfway up the actual drive length. So that's what I did. I just shucked the case off and wrapped it in Kapton tape, and it actually fits perfectly fine in there with the fan in there too. So it's a bit of a tight fit, but it works great, and the Cube stays nice and cool now. This Cube also came with an upgrade pre-installed, and that is a GeForce 6200 AGP that has been flashed. And it's very awesome and a really powerful card, but as we'll get into, it's a little too powerful for my uses. Let's go ahead and jump over to the actual OS now. So I do apologize for the weird angle here. I wish I had direct video capture, but that's just a mess to set up. So you're going to get the camera feed here. But yeah, we're already looking at the Apple System Profiler here. And as you can see, here's our SATA SSD right here. If we go to graphics and displays, we can see there's our GeForce 6200 with a whole 256 megabytes of VRAM, which is just insane for a machine of this age. This thing runs macOS 10.4 like the wind with all the acceleration, because as you can see, we do have Core Image fully supported and Quartz Extreme fully supported. It's awesome. For audio, built in, but it sits on the throne of lies because we do have audio. I'm just using a Sabrent USB audio adapter, and it works perfectly fine for this machine. No disk burning, which is kind of unfortunate for the amount of money you paid for this machine. By the way, I have tried to refurbish the drive, and I've not been successful yet, because it does have a little bit of trouble getting the disk out once you get it in. So that's something I need to do. I need actually to buy some more drive belts. So, why do I say that the GPU is a little too powerful for this system? Because my era, even though we're talking about G4 machines here, my era was Mac OS 9, and as such, a lot of the games I want to run are Mac OS 9 games. Now, some of these games actually got OS 10 ports, when we'll talk about those in a minute, but games like Quake 3 will run in Classic. Now, I'm sure there is a version of Quake 3 that will run in OS 10, but this one does not. Now, it might actually work, but no, it's not going to work. Because as you can see, the macOS 10 UI is still getting in the way, and there's a mismatch as to where the mouse cursor actually is. So, the problem with this now is if I mouse down here, the dock is going to pop up and get in our way. So macOS 9 compatibility is kind of not all there. But if we drop into a game of Quake 3, even if we can play it, it's going to act really strange. I have no control over my character at the moment. You can hear me pressing the keys. Some of them work. Most do not. So, it's really kind of not all that great. But for the games that did get ports, they work pretty well. Like StarCraft, for example. Go ahead and start that up. And it runs perfectly fine because it's got a native port. And just look how fast this runs. Like, oh my good lord. So, it runs great. I mean, StarCraft will run on a potato, but it runs great for an older game. There's no weirdness like there is with Quake 3, even though this hardware is more than capable of running it. You didn't come here to see me play StarCraft. Another game that actually runs okay on here, but it's also just unoptimized, is Diablo 2. Now, before we can actually start the game, we do have to mount the ISO, something I wish I could do back in the day, because I have spent so much money on Diablo 2 discs because they kept breaking in the optical drive. They would develop like a hairline crack in the center of the spindle, and that would spread out to the rest of the disc. But as you can see, it'll start perfectly fine because it's basically brought up to Mac OS 10 standards. But I do have a character already ready to go. And what's interesting about this is this runs a lot worse than it probably should, because it locks at 25 FPS in single player games. But if you go online, or if you play on a LAN game, it'll actually unlock the frame rate, which is interesting, but that's old Diablo 2 for you. I say this game is pretty unoptimized because it is a very heavy game for what it is. But hey, it runs okay on here. I suppose it runs better than the machine I was trying to run it on back in the day, so it's got that going for it at least. This is where a multi-button mouse would be immensely helpful, but it works perfectly fine. So I can save and exit, and if I go to other multiplayer to start a LAN game, it's going to take a minute to actually, I believe, start up the server software. Then it'll load me into the game. Now, we already have FPS up and running. But as you can see, we are not skipping any frames anymore. We're running at a fully unlocked frame rate.
Evil beware.
Ping is very nice at the moment. And we're still dipping down into the 30s, but we're not like locked at 25 like we were. Alright, so enough shenanigans. let's do one more thing. So, some games get ports, but they don't really work as well as I think they should, and we can see that with Unreal Tournament OS X. This is an update that brought it up to OS X compatibility, so you don't have to worry about classic compatibility anymore. And if we double click it and run it, it tries to run, but it's going to stop us because it wants Draw Sprocket. Now, maybe I'm wrong here, but Draw Sprocket was a classic technology, not an OS X one, so I don't know that it's actually going to work on OS X ever. I'm sure there's a way to get it working, but I've looked around and nobody else seems to have this problem, so I'm not sure. And I've tried mounting the ISO, that did not change a thing. So, unfortunately, the ISO is not the problem. So, yeah, that's also kind of why, again, I feel like I'm suffering from success here with the GeForce 6200. This card is amazing, and it runs OS X games like really, really well. But OS X games are kind of starting to reach up into the unfamiliar zone again for me, because up in that era of OS X gaming, I had a 2006 MacBook Pro, and to game on that thing, I would just run Windows on it. I was not really doing gaming with OS X, so I'm not aware of games that are era appropriate for this thing. Maybe Unreal Tournament 2003 and 2004, but that's really about it. So that's kind of where we're at now. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, because there's not much more to talk about, but there will be a part 2 because I do have an upgrade for this machine coming that I think is going to be awesome, and I hope all works out. So till then, I will see you guys later. Bye for now.